Hey folks, Joe Panettiere here. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time. We're going to have a very insightful webcast today, Workgroup Storage, 5 Tech Trends Channel Partners Must Master. I think one of the great things about this webcast is we have spent a lot of time in recent months talking about various cloud opportunities, and very often, I must admit, we overlook some of the existing and growing workgroup opportunities that continue to grow and thrive for the IT channel. So we'll get into that topic discussion today. I want to thank WD, a Western digital company, for sponsoring today's event. They'll be driving a lot of the conversation, answering your questions throughout the event. Before we get into the webcast, let me tell you a little bit about the user interface so that you can navigate everything and interact with us. Let's start with the toolbar at the bottom of your console. Those widgets allow you to open and close widgets on your screen. For example, if you need to adjust your volume, just click on that media player widget. When you're done, click on it again, and that's going to hide your media player window. Yes, you can certainly get social on this webcast. The webinar allows you to take full advantage of Twitter. If you hear something interesting, feel free to tweet it on out to your followers, and the tweet will automatically alert people that you're participating in this webcast. So please get social. In terms of navigating the slides and customizing your webcast console, you can move windows around by dragging on the title bar, or you can resize your windows by clicking on the lower right-hand corner of any window. That really does it for the user interface, simple stuff. And as I said, we're going to cover those 5 tech trends that channel partners must master. In terms of making sure this is an ongoing dialogue, first of all, you can certainly submit questions throughout this webcast. We're going to make sure we cover as many questions as possible. But in addition to that, if a question pops into your head after the webcast, feel free to email me, joe.panettiere@penton.com. And of course, my old 9 Lives Media address continues to work, or you can find me on Twitter. I'll either reply directly, or I will route you to the most appropriate WD expert to make sure we get back to you. Here's a teaser alert. This is a little bit of what we're going to cover today, but I'm not going to go in depth here because I know the WD team is going to go even deeper. Let me tell you who we've got on the line. Let's do a phone line check. We've got Steve Smith, the Senior Product Marketing Manager over at WD. Hey, Steve, is your phone line open?
It is. Thanks, Joe.
Great. Hey, great to have you aboard. Now, Steve is going to be working with us to coordinate the questions coming in from attendees. He'll be navigating those and making sure that we interact with you and cover those questions throughout the webcast. And we're also going to have a more extended open Q&A towards the end. So, Steve, thank you for working with us on that. And then we've also got Martin Proper, the Product Line Manager over at WD as well. Hey, Martin, is your phone line open?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Joe.
Hey, thank you for joining us, Martin. And now Martin's going to be hosting the event in terms of covering the content and then answering a lot of the attendee questions throughout. So, Martin, what I'm going to do at this point is turn over the presentation system to you. Feel free to take it away, and I will pepper in some questions as Steve and I work together to get the audience involved. Sound good?
Sounds great. Hey, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. So, as Joe alluded to, here are the topics that we're covering: convergence of storage and server, Windows coming out as the OS on top, doing it yourself versus an engineered solution, space constraints, and, of course, disaster recovery. So as we move into this, when you look at storage environments, whether they are work groups, small business, what have you, there's a lot of tasks that folks are looking to solve for with their storage environment. When you look at what we used to do with old storage environments, say 20 years ago, your storage server did everything. It was also your application server, your domain server. Then things moved to blades, and everything became very specific. And now as hardware again becomes more powerful, we're looking to do more things with those environments. So the obvious thing for a storage environment would be to share files as a NAS. That's pretty much a no-brainer when you look at this. Additionally, we want to be able to back up all of the clients within our work group or our small business, and a lot of times these are becoming more diverse. It used to be it was only Windows. Now it's a mix of both Windows and Mac, so we need to be able to address both of those platforms and how they back up so that we can take advantage of Time Machine as it's the native backup solution for Mac, and also be able to back up Windows. Some of the other things that make a storage environment important to a small business or even a work group is being able to access that anywhere. So remote access is huge. These network storage servers need to be able to be accessed from everywhere. And when you look at how hard that was in the past to get done, it's gotten incredibly simple these days. The next thing to look at that a lot of people are asking for, believe it or not, 44% of small businesses and work groups are running some form of virtualization. So if you could run all of these different tasks on the same box, the ROI on that box would be huge. So we're looking at storage and servers basically collapsing into the same platform these days, as opposed to having separate NAS boxes, separate application servers, separate virtualization hosts. They're now all falling onto the same platform. There's other things that people are even using these boxes for. An example of an industry vertical would be video surveillance. So when you're looking at the uses for a storage server, it can be your IP surveillance, your virtualization host for storage, remote access so that you can share the files both locally and abroad with a geographically diverse workforce. You can back up all of the clients in case of loss of laptop, loss of employee, what have you, and this is all in one centralized location. One of the things that a lot of folks are surprised is that Windows is coming out as the preferred OS within network storage. There's a lot of players here. A lot of them are Linux-based, but believe it or not, Windows is the coming out as the leader within this space. When we look at this, there's a lot of pretty obvious reasons why. When you look at server, 90% of all servers deployed in the world are actually running Windows. When you look at why, there's the familiarity of Windows, right? So most people have worked on a Windows notebook, a Windows desktop, what have you. And when you're looking at a workgroup installation, deploying a Windows-based server, storage server, is a lot easier than deploying a Linux-based distribution. So within that, when you look at the Linux opportunity, while the Linux distributions are generally free, when you're installing a NAS product, the user interface will vary greatly from one product to another. Interoperability is another reason why a lot of folks would consider the Windows platform over a Linux platform or anything else out there. When you look at the number of applications written for Windows, there are thousands of apps written for Windows, which is more than any other operating system out there. Something else that's interesting, and this is more of a tidbit for you, Microsoft is actually the #1 developer of Linux applications. Probably a very unlikely source, but they do participate within the Linux world. Distributing or repeating the deployment of a storage server, if you're working on work groups and you're deploying those work group servers to multiple work groups within an organization, for instance, here at Western Digital, we actually use workgroup storage in addition to larger file servers. But the repeatability is something that's key. Being able to easily deliver that same platform in a repeatable fashion makes it a very attractive platform to deliver. When we look at Windows, the drivers are all standardized. The Linux community quite often gets overlooked by a lot of the chipset manufacturers, which leads them to be very creative, if you will, and they end up building up their own drivers. Now, I'm not saying that the Linux admins aren't talented, and I'm sure they are, but there's a lot of better uses of their time than building up a driver kit to deploy a server. Microsoft installer packages. If you wanted to install more applications on your Windows storage server, the Microsoft installer package has become a very standardized way of deploying software. It's repeatable. Folks know how to write to it, and it's become very well accepted within the industry. When we look at Linux, the way that I may build up a Linux server would be different than how some of my colleagues might build up a storage server based upon Linux. So what happens, the repeatability becomes more of a challenge in deploying a platform.
Hey, a couple of questions coming in from attendees, Martin, and I'm going to paraphrase them. 3 or 4 people are asking a similar question. They're all asking about the Windows Server environment. Is it mostly the latest build of Windows Server, or do you see your channel partners out there mixing and matching the latest build of Windows Server with some of the older builds that may be out in legacy environments? What's the advice that you're giving to the partners out there?
No, that's actually a really good question. So when we look at this, the great thing about Windows, you can mix and match. So whether it's cost effectiveness of some of the older deployments, whether that's Storage Server 2008 or even just Server 2008, right now you can get really good pricing on 2008-based products because a lot of the 2012 products are at a premium right now. Because it's Windows and it's interoperable, you could bring in, even if you have a 2012 domain, you can bring in a 2008 server and manage that from your 2012 domain. Again, that's one of the benefits of bringing in a Windows platform as a storage server versus a Linux platform. Does that answer the question?
I think that does. Attendees, thank you for that question. That came in from James, Rob, and Mitch. Thank you for those questions. Feel free to submit more. We'll cover as many as we can as we go along. And I will turn it back to you, Martin. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, guys. Some of the other things that we look at are support. While smaller businesses might not be as worried about support, as we look at larger deployments or more work groups, if you will, support becomes more of a concern. 1 box might not be a lot, but 10, 20, or 100 boxes becomes more of a support question. And the question for support becomes, where do I look for support? Do I look to the OEM? Western Digital will support not only the hardware that we deploy, but we also end up supporting our customers on the operating system. So the OEMs will support a Windows-based installation. And even within the OEM support, we have what most look at as an online community. So we have the ability for you to come out and ask questions based on our products, deploying it, and those are actually answered by our tech support, our product managers, and community members, customers like yourselves, that would be looking at the product. So if you don't want to talk to us and you want to go straight to Microsoft, there's always Microsoft support. There's different levels of support that Microsoft offers. A lot of folks already pay for support from Microsoft. Why not add your storage server into that line of support? If you don't want to call Microsoft, there's always TechNet. It's actually one of the largest online communities. I go to TechNet quite often if there's something I'm looking for that a customer emails me on, because chances are someone else may have already asked that question. TechNet is actually supported by Microsoft, and again, the community of MVPs, MCSEs, and just customers out there that have tried different things. And there's also a lot of knowledge-based resources and a lot of knowledge-based articles that are written up on how to do different things with Microsoft operating systems. Security is another thing that a lot of larger companies and even smaller companies are concerned about today. When we deploy a Linux NAS and how those will operate within our Active Directory scheme, a lot of them do have an Active Directory join, but as far as managing that platform, it becomes more difficult. So I can manage my shares sometimes from those Linux platforms, but what happens is they'll actually copy down my domain database, if you will. That's not exactly the most secure way of doing things. It's best to leave the domain list with the domain servers. When we look at user security, we want to leave that within the domain structure and let the domain servers manage that. Application security is also something that we can manage from within Active Directory. So that's a benefit, again, of going the Microsoft path. No, Microsoft's not paying me for this, if anyone was wondering. Some of the other things, as I look at a Linux platform, we've given some of our techs root access to some of our servers, and they'll end up deleting a file. The thing is, that has larger security repercussions than just deleting a file, because that actually deletes the file for everyone. So instead of allowing one person to bring down an entire server because they edited the wrong config file, we compartmentalize with Windows, and we segment users from each other, and that way they can only break their own environment and not the entire box. Engineered solutions versus doing it yourself. And as you can imagine, as a OEM, we have some thoughts on that. And based on those, and again, we're a drive company, we don't believe that all drives are created equal. In fact, we even manufacture them quite differently for different applications. When you look at the drives that you're going to be putting into a storage server, even for a work group, you want to be considering the mean time between failure. That's really how long is this drive meant to last. The drives that we recommend run anywhere from 800,000 to well over 1 million hours of MTBF. Some of the other things that we consider are duty cycle. The duty cycle of a drive is how long is that drive meant to be written to. Desktop drives are meant for an 8-hour workday, if you will. The storage servers are meant to run 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, because we've got folks that are geographically diverse that are getting to these. We're backing up to these boxes, and these hard drives are really getting pounded day in, day out, every day of the year. So we want to make sure that we use the best possible drive, if you will, within that platform. Some of the features that these drives are capable of that we want to make sure that we are bringing in are Keeler. I'll cover that one in a moment. That's time-limited error recovery. Some other things are RAF. And you also want to make sure that we're looking at a higher-end drive with a dual-port processor, dual-core processor within it. That means that we can get data in and out of the drive as fast as possible.
Hey, Martin, as you're going along here, here's another question that came in from Robert, and Robert wants to know, in a workgroup storage environment, should I use SAS drives? And that's SAS, SAS drives.
So when you're looking at storage in this class, so two things that you could use are SAS or SATA. As I look at a workgroup environment with standard gigabit connectivity, I probably would not look at a SAS drive within a workgroup environment. SATA these days will deliver the performance you're looking at. You don't need SAS until you're looking at a high-level application server, tiered storage, something along those lines.
And a follow-up, I think that answers it. Thank you. And a follow-up question, this one coming in from Dave. Dave wants to know, you spoke a lot about using Windows storage server for the NAS. Can you still interoperate with Linux? Like, I think what he's saying is, hey, what if we have a Linux file server in the workgroup? Can we use Windows for the storage portion, but then still have a mixed environment?
Of course you can have a mixed environment. The ease of deployment of Windows was what I was covering. Mixed deployments, you can certainly do that. Again, it all depends on the customer. It depends on the applications that they're running. It's just interesting as we look at the emerging trend of Windows becoming a dominating player within Workgroup. Clearly they're the dominant server architecture, but even in a mixed environment, they're meant to play with others, and they do play well.
Excellent. Thank you for answering that. We got a few more questions coming in. I'm going to hold them and try to sort through them, and we'll pepper them out to you in a few minutes, Martin.
Sure. All right. So as I move into more portions of the drives, so as I look at Keeler means that basically that drive was designed for RAID. And as we talk more about that, so it's time-limited error recovery. Essentially what that means is it limits the amount of recovery time that a drive is going to try to recover badly written data to 7 seconds. That means it won't drop out of a RAID volume. When we look at why that's important, if you were to use a desktop hard drive, a lot of those can go into what we call a deep recovery cycle, and some of those can take up to 2 minutes to get through that recovery cycle, and in which time they would have been dropped out of a RAID volume. And what happens with that is then you get an alert saying, hey, there's something wrong with your storage server, take a look at it. This way, if the drive happens to have an error in writes, it'll not send the acknowledgement back to the application, the user, the computer, what have you, and then they will just issue that command again to write. So it's an improvement for the RAID environment for redundancy of data. When we look at some of the other features, RAF, while that doesn't sound like a lot, it's rotary acceleration feed forward. When we look at the vibrations that are introduced into servers these days, servers are actually getting more vibrations traveling through the systems because we're adding more hard drives. So we have hard drives next to hard drives next to fans. Within a desktop environment, we have folks that will pound on a desk or whatever, and that can affect the hard drive. What RAF does, there are special accelerometers and sensors within the drives that allow it to detect and adapt to its environment. That actually means that we can place the head and onto different parts of the platter so that, one, we won't sustain an impact to the platters, which means that we'll have sustained higher data transfer and, also important, longer hard drive life. So if it's not a perfect environment, this is a technology that will help the drive live longer and keep higher data transfer.
Hey, Martin, while you're talking about hard drive life, here's a quick question that comes in from Jeff. And Jeff wants to know, what about the use of a solid-state drive, and how long of a MTBF, I assume that's mean time between failure, do they have in this type of environment? Any thoughts there?
Sure. So solid state's an interesting technology within this environment. So we have folks that are using that as boot drives, and within a notebook, it makes a lot of sense. There's different technologies. There's MLC, SLC, and I won't go into all of that, but those will also determine how long those drives live. When you look at a SSD, solid-state drive, you want to look at how long it's rated. So when you look at some of the manufacturers out there, they'll warranty them for a year, some 3 years, some 5 years. If I were looking for a drive in the solid-state world, I would actually look at a 5-year drive. There's manufacturers that make very good ones within that. That's essentially how long they rate that drive for MTBF. Because solid-state drives have a limited number of writes that can be written to those drives, an infinite number of reads, but a limited number of writes based on the technology that the drives are created with. So as we look at those, if I were looking at putting a SSD into just a file server, I probably wouldn't unless I needed tiered storage. General workgroup usage, SSD is overkill, in my opinion, based on today's SATA drives. When you're looking at your notebook and boot time, it makes a huge difference. When we're looking at the drives that we're making today with 32 gig or even 64, megs of cache, the caching of the drives before they write to the magnetic media is definitely sufficient when we're looking at a workgroup. I don't know if that was more than Jeff was looking for, but that's...
No, I think you nailed it. And Jeff, if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to send them on in. And we're getting a nice backlog of questions that we'll cover both as we continue with the slides and also during our open Q&A later. Hey, I just want to do a quick time check and a heads up for our attendees. We're about halfway through the program. Certainly we're going to cover more questions. Just a reminder as well, we're giving away an Amazon Kindle Fire towards the end of the program. That'll be drawn at random from our attendee list. You got to be here. You got to be in it to win it, so to speak, so stick around for that. But we got lots more great content to continue on with Martin here. And Martin, I'll turn it back to you, and we'll pepper in some attendee questions as you move along here. Thanks.
Sure. All right. So some of the other features that I like to talk about that stand out when we're looking at workgroup storage. A standard NAS generally doesn't use an enterprise class hard drive. We believe that you should certainly use enterprise class drives because data is crucial to a workgroup, to a small business, as far as keeping data. Some other things to look at. You want to make sure that those drives are within whatever enclosure. If you're buying a engineered solution, like things that Western Digital would make or any other OEM, or you're building it yourself. And as we look at those, if they're hot swappable, it's really great when you can access those without having to take off a case or what have you. The solutions that we manufacture are actually able to you open up the front door, the drives pop right out. There's no screws, no trays. Basically, you pull out a failed drive if it failed, and you pop in a new one. You also want to make sure that your product, your storage server is capable of RAID 1 at the very least, and RAID 5 as you're moving up into larger drive deployments. Redundant gigabit ether, right? So when you're looking at a platform, a lot of the lower-end Linux NAS products, while they are attractive in price, they certainly lack redundancy, whether that's gigabit or even the power. It's a lot of things that are quite often overlooked. If power supply goes bad and it's built into the unit, basically you've downed the entire server because you have to replace power. A dual power environment allows you to keep that server running while just replacing one power supply. Space constraints. So a lot of our customers these days are space constrained. They have no dedicated server room. Space is expensive. When you look at the cost of space from last year to this year, obviously it's gone up because we're not making any more land. London, up 8%. They are actually one of the most expensive places in the world today for office space. As we look throughout the U.S., San Francisco at $36 a square foot. When we look at San Jose, it's a little less. New York, as you would expect, is one of the highest in our nation. With that, space is crucial, and a lot of folks are deploying offices into older construction, older buildings, which don't actually allow for a server room, which means we have to make do with the electricity, 110, that's available to us, and generally a lack of AC, which a lot of rack environments require. So desktop deployments are becoming more popular within the workgroup. When you look at that, you want to make sure that the solution that you're delivering is as compact and as high a density as possible. As we look at some of the products that are out there, the standard product that you might think of will be a pedestal desktop-ish product. Those run generally about 2,000 cubic inches. As we look at some of the newer products that are coming into the market, the microserver market, if you will, those are coming down in under half of the space that a standard desktop server comes in at. And as we look further into the market, we'll also see even smaller products coming in the sub-800. Western Digital actually has one of the smallest products on the market at 449 cubic inches. We have this available in both a Atom and a Xeon platform, which is pretty remarkable when you look at the density of storage at this price point and this size.
Hey, quick question for you coming in from James, and James wants to know, My customers are concerned about noise in the modern storage environment. It sounds like James doesn't, his customers don't have a dedicated area for these servers. And he wants to know, how loud is the typical server going to be in a typical workgroup environment these days? Any tips on that you can offer?
Sure. I won't speak for all of the competitors, so I will speak for my product. When we look at the WD storage servers, we're looking at a idle of about 34 decibels and a peak sound of about 42 decibels. When we're looking at what 32 to 34 decibels sounds like, that's the average quiet office environment. So if you were to drop a microphone into an average office, it would read anywhere from 27 to about 38, 39 decibels, just with AC and everything else running.
Thank you for that.
Sure. Any other questions before I move on?
You know what? There's quite a few coming in, but they pertain to some of your later slides, and I'll see if I can mix and match some of the questions that align right with your slides, and then any others that don't adhere to your slides or aren't aligned with your slides, I'll make sure we hold them for open Q&A. Sound good?
Sure.
Excellent.
All right. Moving on. All right. Last thing that I'm going to cover is disaster recovery. A lot of folks are worried about disaster recovery. Every time there's an earthquake in California, people get scared. There's a lot of natural disasters that make people worry, as well as man-made disasters like people just tripping on cords. So when we look at disaster recovery, as I look at a storage environment, I would want to make sure that a branch office, if you will, would also be able to fail over in the event of a failure of my storage server in my main office. So if my main office was San Francisco and I had a branch office in Chicago, I want to make sure that I'm replicating my data, my crucial, critical business data, from one site to another. Most network storage admins are moving to a co-located environment. There's a lot of folks that are looking at services to do this and not buying hardware. As a trend, people aren't leaving hardware in droves to go sign up with these online services. When we look at those online services, a lot of those are the ones you'd expect: the Amazon, the Carbonites, the CloudMe, the Keep Vaults, Google. The list goes on. The challenge for that is the monthly cost that's incurred for that data that you're pushing up to the cloud. So while you can have a business version of a cloud service, it gets expensive. The trend is actually not going that way. The trend is actually folks are buying more hardware for their work group and replicating that data off-site. So when we look at replication, that's something that we can do remotely from branch to branch, or even if it's a small business, from the business to even, say, the owner's home. And some of the things within Microsoft that make this a easier operation than some of the Linux apps are deduplication. Deduplication allows us to increase our bandwidth efficiency by only backing up the data that's changed in the backup window. So when you're looking to replicate overnight or whatever your replication window is, deduplication and compression within that can actually make better use of a lower bandwidth connection between offices. Some of the things that's also critical are your recovery times. As we're looking at how do we recover that data from a cloud service, if you're just recovering a few files, usually that's not an issue. But when you're looking to recover terabytes of data from the cloud, or looking to bring back a failed laptop, if you will, from the cloud, that can take you up to a week sometimes to recover all of that data, as opposed to just being able to pull it from your local hardware. So an hour is better than a week, in my opinion. That is all I've got as far as disaster recovery and the trends that we're looking at. Before we move into the product, Joe, are there any other questions before we move on to the WD products?
Yeah, actually, some pertain to products, so I'll hold them for that area. But here's a few questions that came in. Joe wants to know, no relation to me, by the way. Joe wants to know, how does the use of ZFS affect drive selection? Any thoughts there?
So ZFS, you can put ZFS on a lot of different drives. Again, if I'm using ZFS in a file server, storage server environment, I would certainly want to drop that on a higher-end drive. Looking at what WD offers, I would start with what we call our RAID drive, which is our entry-level RAID drive, and I would move up from there. The question is, how much data a year are you writing to that drive would depend on what drive I would steer you to. If it's just a work group, you could probably get away with RAID or our entry-level black, the SE drives, and go from there. ZFS, you could also put on SAS drives in a data center class environment.
Excellent. Great. Thank you for that background. Here's a question from Nagesh, one of our attendees, and Nagesh wants to know, for personal desktops, which hard disk do you personally prefer?
What do I prefer? Again, because I leave my desktop on, don't tell IT, but I leave mine on all the time. So in mine, I actually have black drives in mine. I have access to them, but as far as desktop drives for personal use, at home, again, I don't use our blue because I use mine more than 8 hours a day. It's on more than 8 hours a day, and it's getting pounded. So it depends on how you use it. For my wife's computer, I use blue drives inside of it, and it's just fine. So it's how are you using it personally depends on the drive I'd recommend.
Got it. Thank you for that background. Here's one more question, and then I think many of the other questions pertain specifically to WD solutions in the market. So let's do one more question before we get into WD specific solutions. This one comes in from yet another Joe, and this one is Joseph. Joseph wants to know a little bit about your partner program. He wants to know, are you going through distributors, or you do work directly with VARs and the VAR channel? Could you just describe a little bit about your partner program?
Sure. I think that one's actually better suited for Steve. Do you want to take that one?
I thought you were going to tee that up. Good. I was anticipating that. So yeah, we certainly work a lot with our VARs. To answer the question, our distributors primarily are D&H, Ingram Micro, and those are our two main distributors. We also have certainly DMRs like CDW, Insight, PC Connection, and we certainly do work with all kinds of VARs out there. And we have a limited e-tail and retail distribution, Fry's and Micro Center to a limited retail approach.
Got it. Thanks, Steve. Thanks for the answer on that one. And Steve, also hats off. Thank you for coordinating a lot of the questions. Folks, Steve is working the real magic here on the Q&A, helping us to navigate the attendee questions as they come in. So, Steve, thank you for that. And then, Martin, back to you. I think that as you move along here, we'll work in some of the attendee questions that pertain particularly to WD's actual product line. Sound good?
Sure. So as we look at the WD product background, obviously we make some hard drives. That business, we started back in 1988. Before that, we were actually a controller company. We're now the largest hard drive manufacturer in the world. When you look at our consumer products, we look at our storage products, and we make everything from one-bay NAS even to media players that contain hard drives inside. The part of the business that I was speaking to today are storage solutions. We make everything from pedestal products for storage servers to network backup solutions. We started that business in 2011, and we have quite a product lineup within there. As we look at those, there are our X series, the DX4000, RX4100 storage server products. We also have our Sentinel S series products, which are Xeon-based server platforms within the same footprint. The network backup for business are the Arkia series products, which are available in both pedestal and rack mount up to a 2U dual processor Xeon E5, capable of backing up larger installations. Here's our meet the family slide, if you will, of storage server products. When we look at the roles that each of these platforms can perform, when we look at our X series, that's network storage for SMB and Workgroup. When we look at our S series, that's the modern IT deployment. It's definitely a converged product, capable of being both your domain controller, your application server, hybrid cloud, and your unified storage all in one box.
So as you're going through these, here's a question about pricing. And Martin, I don't know if you can get into pricing. I know it's sometimes difficult because there's so many different price points in the market. But Kenneth would like you to take a stab at it. He asked, what is the price point for that 449 cubic inch unit you had mentioned earlier?
So I'm going to jump to slide 36.
That's just what I was going to say.
Yeah, you're spoiling us.
All right, so when we're looking at the entry level price points, so these are MSRP. So I can tell you these all day long because you can find these on our website. And again, this is MSRP. Our 4 terabyte entry level starts at $899. Now, these are all with our Enterprise Black level drives. So this is above the red drives I spoke about earlier. So we start at $899 for that platform, and with a 16 terabyte configuration, that'll go up to $1999. When we look at the DS series, those start at $2,500 and go up to $4,500 for a 16 terabyte quad-core Xeon configuration.
Got it. Excellent. And then
can I just add? I'm sorry, Joe.
Yep. No. Go for it, Steve.
I was just going to add, since we're on this slide, if anybody wants any further information, you can just simply go to www.wd.com, and from there, that's our website. You can navigate to the Business Solutions section, and of course, a lot more information is there.
Excellent. Great. Here is a question that comes in from David, and David's talking about your entire portfolio, and he's saying, hey, generally speaking, do your products produce auditable log files? Is that part of the conversation here or not much?
So we do have an audible alarm, an auditable. Is it audible or auditable? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
You're putting a journalist on the spot. Auditable.
Auditable, yes. Our products will generate log files. Basically, it's a Windows platform. The log files are, you can save them, export them. We participate with basically whatever Windows will put out or whatever app that you would like to install within the platform. So, yes, there is a log file that's generated. We actually have logs on our hardware that we record, and there's also system logs.
Excellent. Okay. And then a few attendees are asking which of your solutions support NFS?
So NFS. So the DX4000 RX4100 would not support NFS, but the DS series, actually let me step back. These guys on the right, the DS5100, 6100, those would certainly support DFS natively. As far as, NFS or DFS? NFS.
NFS.
NFS, yeah. The answer is still 6100, 5100. One of the things that folks ask is DFS. And yes, they all support DFS as well, as long as the 4000, DX4000, 4100 have a namespace server to answer to, if you will.
Excellent, excellent. Now, a few attendees are asking about positioning in the market of these various solutions, and I think your next slide covers that, which we skipped earlier. So rather than ask the attendee questions, let's just, I think, go right to that in terms of talking about positioning.
Sure. So, Steve, do you want this one, or you want me to take it?
Sure, I can take it. No problem. And then you can chime in, of course. But when we do talk about positioning of this product, it's really easy. We say it's proven, reliable, affordable, and it's proven because, as Martin had mentioned, this is based on Windows, Microsoft Windows. It's Intel processors. So, and of course, it's got the hardware from WD, and WD knows storage. We've been in the business for quite some time. So we've got 3 industry leaders. So it's very proven. You're not going to go wrong selecting our product because we're going to be around. And of course, as Martin mentioned, it supports thousands of Windows applications. It's the standard. When we talk about reliability, this is where WD's engineering comes into play. We've got dual redundant DC in ports, gigabit Ethernet. We talked about our enterprise class drives, 24/7, 365, RAID. It's a very robust system, so it's very reliable, and we work very hard. That reliable messaging is very important to us. And of course, the affordability piece of it, this is where we talk about our enterprise caliber warranty and technical support and our all-inclusive hardware. So it's ready to go. It's ready to set up. It's been tested as a complete unit. And, of course, with our X series, you can get up to 16 terabytes for $2,000. It's $19.99, so we like to say under $2,000. $1999.99, so 16 terabytes for under $2,000. And I think a lot of people have resonated with that. So take it away, Mark.
Sure. No, I think you pretty well nailed that. No, we definitely proven reliable and affordable. A lot of folks, it resonates well. They get the Wintel platform, if you will, and with the addition of the WD Enterprise Class drives, that just adds to the proven and the reliable message.
So fantastic, Martin. Thanks for everything so far. Did you want to go through the, I know you covered one of the final slides. I think there's one more that we were going to get to before we go to open Q&A.
I think the last one we were going to cover, as you mentioned before, was being sociable. There's a lot of ways to connect with WD. We have YouTube channels, Spiceworks, and LinkedIn. So
excellent.
We're out there.
Yeah, so keep the conversation going, folks, and let's keep the conversation going right now. Let's do a time check and some housekeeping items. We got about 10 minutes left. We got plenty of attendee questions to plow through. Then don't forget, we're giving away that Amazon Kindle Fire as we wrap up the program, and we'll also make sure that there are ways to track down Steve and or Martin post-event if you have follow-up questions. So,
and Joe, I'll just chime in and say, there may be some questions that we can't get to, and certainly we can take those offline. As you just mentioned, we can get back to you through email or whatnot.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate that, Steve. We do appreciate your availability to tackle those. Here's a question that comes in from John, and John wants to know, when you say roughly $2,000 for 16 terabytes, is that raw storage space or with a RAID configuration?
So that is raw storage. You will that'll be a RAID 5 configuration, so it will be an effective 12 terabyte usable. Good question.
Excellent. Yep, great. Hey, here's one from Nagesh, who is hoping you will continue to do webcasts of this type, and he wants to know, I just want to know, is there any session you are planning in the future regarding external drives? I've got a ton of questions about external drives and you in the market.
Okay. We definitely have a whole group that focuses on external drives. Nagesh, if you want, send your questions over, and we will do our best to answer every one of them.
Yeah. So Nagesh, just to build on that, as the questions are submitted into our system here, WD does get a full report so that they're able to contact you post-event with questions like this. So feel free to send in more. We'll make sure the WD team is able to respond post-event. Okay, great. Let's go to a couple of other questions that have to do with sort of some of the cloud issues. I'll paraphrase. Some of the attendees are wondering if you've seen channel partners race to the cloud, have some issues, and then come back to Workgroup storage. Can you just sort of paraphrase the trend you're seeing in the market in terms of this continued investment in on-premises storage and actually the growing market here that you're seeing?
Sure. So, as everyone's aware, there was a flood in Thailand a few years ago, and it affected a lot of the hard drive manufacturers. So everyone thought, we're going to go to the cloud for storage. We're going to use these data centers. People are going to come in droves. And it didn't quite work out that way because a lot of folks looked at the cloud storage, and they looked at the return, the cost of cloud storage, and they thought, you know what? I could actually have this hardware on-premise, and I own the hardware, I own the data. Another thing that spooked a lot of people here recently was little government snooping. So when you look at Google and Yahoo and everyone who's forced to give over access to all of the data that they have sitting on their servers, folks are a little less likely to put their data in the cloud. I have no issue putting my personal stuff out there. A lot of folks are a little more cautious with corporate data, putting it in the cloud. So, there was definitely a race to it. It seemed great. I don't have to put up any infrastructure, but then mitigating environmental or social, if you will, circumstances have made people retract a little from the cloud.
Thanks for the background. Hey, Steve, I'm going to ask you to cover the next question from Ryan. I just want to make sure that I don't get any of the product or company names wrong. So you want to take a crack at that one?
Sure. The question is, how do the features compare to QNAP and Synology? Martin, do you think you want to cover that on a high level?
Sure. When we look at QNAP and Synology, and I'm going to keep this very light because I don't get into a lot of competition talk. You can go out there, you can look at the features and what have you. When you look at storage server base, you'll find a lot of the same features within all manufacturers. When you look at our DS line, you will not find another product on the market with a Xeon processor in that footprint. So when you look at the capabilities within that product compared to the other guys, you'll have to go to a bigger platform to do what that can do. How's that for treading lightly?
It works for me. Steve, that work for you?
Yes. Yeah, no, I just want to say there's a lot of great questions, and I know that we are probably not going to be able to get to everybody.
Yeah. Yep.
So we're definitely going to have to respond to some of these guys offline.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great questions.
So, yeah, thank you very much, folks. We are running tight on time, so why don't we at this point, let's do a giveaway, but I'm also going to bring up each one of your names one last time and make sure that our attendees are able to reach out to you post-event if they need to. Let me push that out right now, Steve Smith and Martin. It's easy to find both of you online. Is that fair to say, Steve? You easy to track down?
Yes, I'm pretty easy to track down. Steve.smith@wd.com.
Excellent.
WDC. WDC.com.
Yep, WDC.com. And Martin, same email.
You could guess the very same thing, that I would be martin.proper@wdc.com.
Fantastic. Thank you both for covering all the questions. Now let's do that giveaway, the Amazon Kindle Fire. The lucky winner is Tim from Divine IT. Tim, thank you very much for joining us, and congratulations. Our team will be in touch with you post-event about that giveaway. You're the winner. And then there was an Amazon gift card as well. That one actually is given away as part of an email drawing that goes out to our attendees post-event, so stay tuned for that. I think that covers our event. Steve, Martin, thank you so much for walking attendees through these 5 opportunities going forward in Workgroup Storage. We really appreciate your time today. Before we do sign off, Steve, any closing thoughts? Do you think we covered all the hot bases?
I think we did, and I just want to reiterate that if you're a VAR partner, come to our website, and you can sign up to be more of an authorized VARs, and as I mentioned, distributors Ingram Micro, D&H, and the DMR, CDW, Insight, PC Connection. So feel free, if you have any issues with trying to get our product, feel free to send Steve or myself or Martin an email.
Sounds great. And it's just first name dot last name at WDC.com. And Martin, how about you? Do you think we covered all the bases?
No, I believe so. There have been a lot of great questions, and we will certainly do our best to answer all of the questions that you folks are posting. I'm looking, and there's definitely some really good questions that we can still answer.
That sounds great. Thank you both so much for sharing your insights today. Attendees, thank you for joining us. Thank you for submitting your questions. The WD team, a Western digital company, will certainly be in touch with you post-event to answer additional questions. And on behalf of Penton Technology Group and our channel team, we thank you very much for always interacting with us. I hope you know where to reach our content team, whether it's Jessica Davis, Charlene O'Hanlon, CJ Arlotta, Michael Cusinelli. Feel free to do so, and then the sponsorships, well, that's pretty straightforward as well with Kelly and Debbie there. So thank you, folks, very much for always interacting with us, for joining our webcast. Signing off for today, Joe Panettiere. Have a great afternoon, folks. We appreciate your time. Take care now.